In this session, we are going to discuss quantitative research methodology. So when a researcher do the research, they can either follow qualitative research methodology or quantitative research methodology or mixed methodology. It depends on the objective with which the researcher starts the process of research. So now in this session, we are going to discuss about quantitative research methodology. So what is quantitative research? Quantitative research involves collecting and analyzing numerical data. It focuses on measurement, patterns, and statistical analysis. It helps in studying various things in a numerical data form. So whenever we want to know the percentage, the quantity, the measurement, we use quantitative research methodology. Quantitative research is a systematic investigation that involves the collection and analysis of numerical data to identify patterns, test hypotheses, and examine relationships between different variables. It emphasizes objectivity, measurement, and statistical analysis to produce results that can be generalized to larger population. Quantitative research methodology is used a lot in social science. The main characteristics of quantitative research methodology are: it works with numerical data. It focuses on collecting and analyzing numbers rather than words or images. So if we want to know why a particular thing is happening, we go with qualitative research methodology. If we want to know how many or what is happening, we generally use quantitative research methodology. It is done in a very structured manner. This particular research methodology uses standardized tools like survey, questionnaire, and various tests. It generally happens with large sample sizes. A structured questionnaire is distributed among a large sample size, which they fill up and they return. That data is analyzed and interpreted by using several analytical or statistical tools. This particular research is very objective in nature. It helps to collect the data by minimizing the biasness from the researcher. This particular research methodology helps and is aided by lot of statistical tools. Statistical analysis uses descriptive and inferential statistics to interpret the data that a researcher collects. Procedures are systematic and can be repeated by other researchers as well. This particular research methodology helps to test the hypothesis, and it helps a lot in experiential research. It can determine the causal links between variables. It helps us to understand the cause and effect relationship. So by now I'm sure you know what are variables. So when we want to understand the relationship between variables, what kind of cause and effect relationship exists between the variables, this particular research methodology helps us in doing that. So with this, we come to quiz number 1. So let's start quiz number 1. So the first question of this quiz is: quantitative research primarily focuses on, and your options are: A, words and meanings; B, numerical data and statistical analysis; C, cultural understanding; D, personal experience. And the correct option is numerical data and statistical analysis. Now we go to question number 2. Which of the following is a key characteristic of quantitative research? And your options are: A. Flexible, unstructured tools. B. Small sample size. C. Subjective interpretation. And D. Use of structured tools. And the correct option is use of structured tools. We come to the third question of quiz 1, that is, quantitative research mainly uses A. Numbers, B. Pictures, C. Stories, and D. Opinions. And the correct option is A. Numbers. So with this we come to the end of quiz 1. Now we are going to discuss what are the different types of quantitative research method. The first is descriptive research, then we have correlational research, experimental research, quasi-experimental research, cross-sectional research, and longitudinal studies. So we will discuss each one of them one by one. To start with, descriptive research. Descriptive research is a very important type of quantitative research methodology. It describes characteristics or trends that a researcher is going to study in its work. The tools that they mainly use in this research are surveys, observation checklist, and census data. Example is, let's say if you want to understand the percentage of students using online learning tools, you can actually use this descriptive research methodology. So these days, these online teaching learning platforms are becoming very important. So if you as a researcher want to understand what are the percentage of students they are using this kind of online teaching learning platforms, then you can use this particular method to find out the result. Next we go to is correlational research. So what is correlational research? Correlational research is a type of quantitative research method which is used to examine the relationship between two or more variables without manipulating them. It's very important. In correlational research, the variables are not manipulated by the researcher. It helps to determine whether variables are related, and if so, the direction and the strength of the relationship. So as we discussed in the beginning, that quantitative research is majorly used to understand the relationship between the variables. So this particular research methodology helps us to understand what kind of relation exists between this particular variables and in which direction and what is the strength of that particular relationship. So correlational research methodology is used a lot when this kind of variable relationships we are going to see. It uses correlation coefficient to measure the strength and direction. For example, if we want to understand the relationship between screen time and academic performance of a student, we can use this. These days, we are discussing a lot that usage of social media by students, especially the school students, are reducing their academic performances. It is said that many a time too much usage of social media actually is affecting their concentration power. They are not able to concentrate on a particular topic for a longer time. So if we want to understand that, if we want to really understand what is the relationship between the screen time and the concentration power of the student or the academic performance of a student, then we can use correlational research to understand the relationship between the variables. Next, we will be discussing about experimental research. Experimental research is a quantitative research method which is used to determine cause and effect relationships between variables. In this method, the researcher manipulates one variable, generally the independent variable, and observe its effect on another variable, that is the dependent variable, while controlling all other factors. It manipulates independent variable and controls others. So by now, since you have already studied variable, so you know when we write hypothesis, we generally write about the relationships between the independent and the dependent variable. So when we are doing experimental research, we generally manipulate the independent variable while keeping the dependent variable constant. This actually helps us to do this kind of research. It uses control and experimental groups. It actually helps us to understand the causation that can be established between the variables. For example, if you are going to introduce a new teaching method and you want to understand how it's going to affect the student, this study can be done. So we all remember during the COVID time, many universities, colleges and schools shifted suddenly to the online mode. Now a student who was studying in class 9 in a full offline mode, suddenly in class 10, they started studying the online mode. The teachers were coming through in the online mode, they are sharing their data, they are sharing their notes and everything in the online mode. So how a student is going to react? Now, if we want to understand this, the effect that is happening on the student, because student remain constant. Another thing that the teaching method is changing. So at one time it is an online teaching method, now it's an offline teaching method, again an online teaching method. So we are basically changing the independent variable while keeping the dependent variable constant. If we want to do a research on this kind of things, we can use experimental method. This actually helps us to understand the relationship between this cause and effect. The next one that we are going to discuss is quasi-experimental research. Now, quasi-experimental research is a type of quantitative research that is used to examine cause and effect relationships when random assignment of participant is not possible. It resembles experimental research but lacks one key element, that is randomization. It is similar to experimental research but no random assignment. It is useful in real world setting. Now, as for example, if you want to compare two existing classroom groups, you can use this quasi-experimental research. So let's say in class 6 or 7 or 8, there are 3 classrooms and the same teacher is teaching biology in all the classrooms, but the results are coming out different. So if you want to do a research on that, okay, what are the factors that are playing role here? Quasi-experimental research can be done. So here we have discussed 4 different ways. One is a descriptive research, one is an experimental research, one is a correlational research, and one is a quasi-experimental research. All these 4 are very important part of quantitative research methodology. Now with this we come to quiz 2. So quiz 2, we will be having a set of 3 questions and options. So question 1 of quiz 2. In correlational research, researchers study A. How two variables are related, how people feel. Option C, only one person at a time. And option D, past historical events. And yes, I'm sure you have guessed it correct. Option A, how two variables are related, is the correct option. Now we go to question number 2. Experimental research tries to find option A, personal experiences. Option B, cause and effect relationship. Option C, cultural meanings. And option D, historical details. And so the correct option is cause and effect relationship. Now we come to question number 3. Quasi-experimental research does not use A, control groups, B, treatment groups, C, random assignment, and D, data collection. And the right option is random assignment. So with this we come to the end of quiz 2. Now we were discussing about quantitative research methodology, where at the beginning we said that this particular research method used lots of numerical data. So when we are using numerical data, we have to collect the data in a very structured manner. The surveys are conducted in a very structured manner. A proper structured questionnaire with options are circulated among the respondents. Respondents use them, respondents see them, they tick them or write them, and then they submit. And today it has become easier with the Google Forms. So what a researcher can do, they can make a Google form and circulate among the people. In fact, it is becoming easier for the researcher because, as you know, in Google form, we can make that these are the questions which you have to answer, compulsorily answer. So that many a time help the researcher to get all the answers from the respondent. So surveys are a very, very important part of this particular research methodology. Surveys collect structured data from large samples which are used for data analysis. Statistical analysis like regression, t-test, ANOVA, chi-square test can be used, but it is again based on your hypothesis, and it is also based on what the researcher wants to do, what kind of survey analysis they are going to do. It helps to test the hypothesis and measure the significance, like why this is done and what is the utility of doing this. Now, there are multiple advantages of quantitative research method. The first one is obviously it is very objective and it gives a reliable result. It can be generalized to large population. In qualitative research, a large population is difficult to analyze. But in quantitative technique, large population can be easily analyzed because here you are just collecting this data in a very structured manner, and then with the help of different statistical tools, you are analyzing it to get the result. It is very, very effective for hypothesis testing because if we have a hypothesis, we can test it very easily with this. But this also have a lot of limitations. Like the first limitation is it is having less depth. In qualitative methods, we can actually understand the feelings of the respondent, why the respondent are doing this. But here, that part is missing. So the depth is not there. Many ignore context or emotions. Emotions cannot be quantified. So emotional part of the research, it's difficult to get through this. Responses are limited by structured tools. Since it is very structured in nature, you have a structured questionnaire which you are using for this. So the responses are also very limited in that structure. Next is qualitative research actually talks about numbers, statistics and pattern. It is very useful for hypothesis testing and drawing conclusions. It is definitely can be used along with the qualitative research as well as a mixed research methods. As we are discussing quantitative research methodology and we discussed about the advantages of quantitative research methodology, so we also have to discuss about there are certain limitations that this quantitative research method is having. The first one is superficiality. Using precise and restrictive operational definitions may inadequately represent complex context. For example, the context of mood may not be represented in a very proper way when we are doing quantitative research technology. Another very important limitation of this is narrow focus. Predetermined variables and measurement procedures can mean that many a time the researcher is ignoring other relevant observation. As we discussed, as quantitative research methodology generally follow a very structured pattern. So it might happen that these things may not be considered properly when we are doing the research. Next is there can be a structural bias, which is also a very important limitation for quantitative technique. Despite standardized procedures, structural biases can still affect quantitative research methodology. Missing data, imprecise measurements, or inappropriate sampling methods are biases that can lead to wrong conclusions at times. Lack of context. Quantitative research often uses unnatural settings like labs or fails to consider historical and cultural context that may affect data collection and result. So the researcher must follow certain procedures when they're doing quantitative research methodology. Another very important part that a researcher needs to understand is the ethical consideration. So whenever we are doing a research, it is very important that the respondents must know the objective of the researcher. It's very important to discuss before the survey is conducted why the survey is used. A proper consent from the respondent is always required. The respondent must not be kept in dark. If they are not able to understand why this particular research is getting conducted, it will be very difficult for them to answer properly. Another very important part is confidentiality. The respondent's confidentiality need to be respected. If a respondent is not willing to disclose the name, then that confidentiality need to be maintained. The purpose of the research need to be discussed with the respondent. Whether it is for academic purpose or it is for market purpose, it's very important. Sensitive documents need to be handled in a very sensitive manner. It can harm the emotions or the feelings of the respondent. So the researcher needs to be very careful in doing that. Now, since we were discussing that this particular research, quantitative research technique, is a very numerical one and it is done with the help of statistical analysis. So there are multiple softwares that can be used to analyze them. One, the most common one is Excel. Microsoft Excel, which is available in most of the machines and it can be very well used for statistical analysis. Another is SPSS, which is also widely used these days. SPSS is a software that helps a lot the researcher in doing these activities. SPSS is basically the full form of SPSS is Statistical Package for Social Sciences. It is widely used in social science and education. It is user-friendly interface suitable for beginners. It performs descriptive and inferential statistics. You just need to understand how the data will be put into the machine and which analysis to be done, and they will help you with that. Another very interesting statistical analysis software that are used widely is Strata. It is a very powerful data analysis, econometrics, and it actually helps in large data sets. It is used extensively in economics, sociology, and public health. Then we have SAS. The full form of SAS is Statistical Analysis System. It is used in advanced analytics, business intelligence, and health research. It is highly robust for large complex data. When you are handling large data which are very complicated in nature, this particular software can be done. Another very common statistical software which is used in quantitative research technology is R. So R is a very excellent for advanced statistics, data visualization and modeling. Large number of packages are there which can be used with the help of R. Python is also used a lot these days. It is free and highly flexible, and it is used for analysis in machine learning and also in automation. So these are basically the softwares which can be used for data analysis. Now along with that, we also need to discuss about data collection, because a good data collection will only lead to a good data analysis. So data can be collected, or the survey can be done with the help of Google Forms. Google Forms are a free tool for creating surveys. It is automatically compliance data in spreadsheets, which is very important. Collection of data is one part, but After the collection, putting the data into a spreadsheet is a very big task. So the Google form actually help us in doing that. Other than this, there are many other ways through which you can conduct the survey, like SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, Toolbox. These are also available through which the surveys can be conducted. But in quantitative research methodology, one thing is very important, and that is questionnaire. You have to make a proper questionnaire, because a proper questionnaire will only lead to the proper answers, and those answers will help us in properly analyzing and testing the hypothesis. So it is always advisable that when you are following a quantitative research methodology, you should use a pilot survey. Pilot study is basically when, with a questionnaire, to test whether your questionnaire is correct or not, you can do this pilot study. So in a small group of people, in a small sample size, you can distribute the questionnaire, they can fill up, and you can analyze it. If you see the analysis is correct, if you see the hypothesis can be tested with the questionnaire that you are having, and they are appropriate, then that particular questionnaire can stand. Or else you can change the questionnaire. If you don't do a pilot survey, you go directly with the questionnaire and with the respondent, large respondents, and after collecting the data, if you find out that no, the hypothesis cannot be tested, the proper analysis is not getting, the proper results are not coming, then it is really very difficult to change the question and start the survey again. So it is always advisable that you do a pilot survey before you go with the large respondents. Now with this we come to quiz number 3. So the first question of quiz 3 is, which software is widely used for statistical analysis in social sciences? And your options are A. Photoshop, B. SPSS, C. AutoCAD, and D. Premiere Pro. And the correct option is B. SPSS. We go to the second question. Which tool is mainly used to collect survey? Google Forms, Power BI, MATLAB, Tableau. And yes, the correct option is Google Form. Question number 3. Descriptive statistics are used to test hypotheses, summarize and describe data, establish causation, compare two cultures. The correct option is summarize and describe data. Conclusion, I can see that quantitative research method is very important for the researchers to understand. This particular research is actually gives us authentic result. It helps us to test the hypothesis, and in this kind of research methodology, the analysis that is done, the findings which are presented are generally unbiased, because here you are collecting the data from the people with the help of survey, and that data is getting analyzed with the help of statistical tools, and the findings are present to the people. So these findings can be used, retest, and can be done by other researchers as well. So at the end, both qualitative and quantitative research methods are very important for a researcher to understand research methodology properly. The researcher can go with any one of them, or can be a mixed method also. That completely depends on the objective of the researcher. Thank you.